What's up, guys? This is Mikey from That Dynasty Show. Just wanted to make a quick announcement. We are officially going new year, new us type of deal. We are rebranding. We will no longer be known as That Dynasty Show. We are transitioning into Goal Line Dynasty, and we're going to start using new logos and that name moving forward. So just a heads up, if you start to see changes throughout any of our videos, we are still the same people. We're still going to be doing the same things, but we are going to be getting after it with the name Goal Line Dynasty. In the video coming up, I do refer to us as That Dynasty Show, as this was recorded before we finally landed on the name, but we're really excited about the rebrand, and we're really excited to be bringing you more videos throughout 2023 to talk about those Dynasty squads. With that being said, let's get into the video. What's up, everybody, and welcome into another exciting episode of That Dynasty Show. As always, I'm your host, Mikey Ostrowski, and I am joined by my great, wonderful co-host, Tyler Beck. Tyler, how we doing, buddy?
I'm great, buddy. Glad to be talking to you after a long day of work, and excited to really, get a chance to talk about any names that we want to pick out of the Dynasty rankings today.
Yeah, so what we're going to do here today is we're going to go through keep, trade, cut, right? And I know keep, trade, cut is kind of controversial, but at the moment, it is probably the best tool out there because it's completely sanctioned, by the fantasy community, for the fantasy community, via the real life keep, trade, cut questions that it asks. So we're going to kind of go position by position. We're probably going to focus more or less on the running backs and receivers just because it's a bit more to talk about. But we do got to touch base on a little bit of everything. So let's jump into it, right? Let's look at this quarterback group here, and we're going to pick out, maybe some buy lows, some sell highs, or maybe even talk about a couple of hold guys here. So Tyler, tell me if you disagree with this, but Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, they're listed as the top four quarterbacks in KTC. I'm not saying none of these are a buy low, obviously. None of them are a sell high because I'm not selling any of them. It's just if you can get them in a trade, go and get them in a trade, right? Like, I don't really think there's anything else we could say about those four guys.
Yeah, I mean, these are the guys that, they're the 4 first-round picks worth of value type guys. You're not going to get them for anything less, and nobody's probably going to really pay you anything more for them. That being said, I think it's a point to be made that I think when you're in a startup, it's just so crucial because it's so hard to find these top-tier quarterbacks. I think it's just so crucial to leave the top 2 rounds with a solidified quarterback room. And when you're in a super flex, especially in super flex, I mean, really pretty much only in super flex is where I'm that worried about quarterbacks, right? But I think it just gives you so much more flexibility, moving forward in your dynasty league. If you're going through a startup right now, a super flex, you need to draft 2 quarterbacks in the first 2 rounds. I don't care if you're reaching a little bit or getting a decent value, just do it. It allows you to spend every rookie pick you have for the next, 5, 6, 7, even probably longer years on all skill players. And I think it just is a supreme advantage for all dynasty teams. But those 4 guys, like you said, the 4 first-round picks of value, if you can buy them, go ahead and buy them. If you can afford them, if your roster is already filled out and you can afford to go make that move and go get these guys, go get them. But I mean, I don't really see any reason to move off of one in order to fill out a roster. I think their positional value, their positional advantage is enough, and I would rather build around them than try to break them down into pieces and compete that way.
Yeah, I completely agree. And a good example is I'm in a 16-team Superflex league, and I traded the farm. I started off in the startup draft a couple of years ago. I took Josh Allen, but I traded the farm to also get Joe Burrow. And I mean, the rest of my team's pretty old and aging. Like I've got Josh Jacobs, Devontae Adams, Keenan Allen, Darren Waller, those old guys like that. And I really don't have a lot of draft picks to show for it. However, I have Josh Allen and Joe Burrow, right? Like that's a guaranteed 50 points just between those 2 guys each week. And that's bare minimum. One of them could get 50 points alone any given week because that's just how good they are. So yeah, I'm all in favor of just going for broke, send the trades that you need to. If you want to call them buy highs, call them buy highs, whatever. But in super flex leagues, there is no better players to invest in than Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and Joe Burrow. But this next tier in the quarterback, there's a lot to talk about, right? So number 5, Justin Herbert. I would say, and tell me if you disagree, I would say he's a sell high right now, or a sell high, because I don't see why he's still being treated as the QB5, right? Like the Chargers have some weird, I mean, they're sticking with Staley as their head coach, right? But they're going to need to bring in a new offensive coordinator next year. Keenan Allen's going to be like 32. Mike Williams can't stay healthy. Austin Eckler is starting to get up there in age. It's only a matter of time before we, start to see the decline there. Gerald Everett is like ancient. Like, what does Justin Herbert have going on that makes him so much more valued than even a guy like Trevor Lawrence or Dak Prescott? Like, why are we valuing Justin Herbert so much? Is it just because of his age?
I mean, I'd like to say that that's part of it, but at the same time, I mean, there's a lot of quarterbacks that are young. I mean, Justin Herbert has shown plenty over the last couple of years. I don't necessarily want to move off of him right now because I think he's more of a hold type guy. I mean, it's tough. Like you said, they have aging weapons that aren't haven't been effective all season long, and have their breakout games and still flash. But I mean, like you said, he's relying on Gerald Everett and Keenan Allen right now. Unless they address this wide receiver room in the draft and get him more weapons, I mean, yeah, it's hard to make an argument even for him over T-Law, or these guys. T-Law went in the late rounds of the draft last year. He was a supreme buy low last year after his rookie year. Justin Herbert right now, I think, his value's kind of plateaued. They're gonna have to improve the roster if he's gonna want to stay up in that top tier. Everybody who drafted him over either Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen last year that was trying to make a crazy statement, you were dead wrong. So you got pretty burned for that. But yeah, I'm not in love with Herbert. I don't have many shares of him anyways. I guess you could call him a buy low because there are some people who are probably looking to break him down or tear down into the Justin Fields range maybe.
Well,
Yeah, I don't know what to make out of Justin Herbert. I'm probably as just of loss for words as everyone with him.
that's the thing. I like calling him a sell here because I would love to tear down, quote unquote, from Justin Herbert. Like, apparently he's worth more than Trevor Lawrence. He's worth more than Lamar Jackson. He's worth more than Justin Fields. He's worth more than Dak Prescott. And those other guys that I mentioned are kind of close in value, but I got to bring up Dak Prescott because he's arguably my biggest buy low, especially after that massive performance that he put up in the division round of the playoffs. I mean, dude, he's ranked as QB 11, worth only a score of 4,000 compared to Justin Herbert, who's QB 5, worth a score of 6,000. This is basically telling you that you would need to add, you could trade Justin Herbert for Dak Prescott and like a late first round pick or something like that. I would take that 10 out of 10 times right now. I don't care that Dak is 5 years older than Justin Herbert. Dak is going to help me win now. Justin Herbert, there's a lot of questions with. And I mean, dude, Justin Herbert was the QB 11 overall this year. Despite playing in all 17 games, he averaged, 17.02 points per game. That's not top 5 QB numbers. That's terrible. Like, you can find that on the waiver wire in any redraft league, right? Pick up Daniel Jones for the week and he's getting you 17 points, right? So that's not impressive. It was a down year for Justin Herbert. So theoretically you should be saying buy low, right? But he's still ranked in people's minds as top 5 dynasty quarterback. I can't buy him for that. So I'll take the tier down. I'll call a guy like Dak Prescott, a buy low, and a guy like Justin Herbert a sell high.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can get a better deal for Justin Herbert than Dak in Elite First just based off of name pedigree alone. But I mean, Dak is Mr. Consistent, and that's what he has been. I'm a Dallas fan. I'm very vocal about that, but I've been a Dak fan obviously since his rookie year when he came into the league. I think he's been nothing but awesome, and I've watched him put the Cowboys on his back week after week for the last however many years. It's hard to believe that he's turning 30. Yeah, I mean, I love Dak Prescott. I think he's king consistency. I don't think he's ever really going to finish as a top 3 quarterback, But I mean, when you're able to have Dak as your QB2, it's a real advantage. He's a guy who in the last year, he's missed a handful of games, but over the course of his career, it hasn't been a problem. I don't envision it being a problem. He was much more of a runner earlier on in his career. Since that leg injury, he has definitely slowed down on that. But he showed just the other night in that playoff game that he's definitely still more than capable. So who knows? Maybe as that starts to progress and maybe further down the line, that turns into be more of a weapon again for him. Obviously, as you age, it's not more likely that you become more of a rusher, but I mean, we'll see. I mean, I love Dak, and I think everybody should love Dak. I think he definitely is a good value. I'd probably rather have him over Kyler Murray than, I mean, especially coming off the injury now. Definitely over Deshaun Watson to probably over Lamar too. I mean, I think Lamar actually is probably one of my biggest sells. Even though I think he still does have league winning upside and QB1 upside. I mean, the guy has a lot of carries on his body, a lot more than you want your quarterback to have. He's like in the territory where if you drafted him as a running back, you would start to be getting concerned like, hey, this is a lot of touches on this guy's body. I don't know how long he's going to last. Maybe it's time to sell. I don't like that in my quarterback, and I think it's definitely time to move off of Lamar. So I don't know how you feel about that, but with his uncertainty with his contract and these injuries that he's having these same surgeries that RG3 had, it's like, I don't know, do I want to get burned by that, or do I want to just take the package that I can get? I know I can still get a haul for him. I don't know. How do you feel about Lamar?
If I can buy low, honestly, I am. I would consider him more of a buy low than a sell high. However, it really just depends on who you ask. And according to KTC, he's kind of right in the middle at QB6. Honestly, QB6 is a little high for me because he needs to get out of Baltimore this offseason, right? I don't care where he goes as long as it's not Baltimore. And I don't think Lamar's a bad passer. I think that he can transition perfectly fine. He's never going to be a pocket passer ever, right? Like even when he's 30, if he's still in the league running around, that's exactly what he's going to be do, right? He's going to be running around. But he needs to go to a team that's going to invest in him, and a team that's going to do it properly. Baltimore has given him jack shit at receiver for the last, I mean, Lamar's entire career, right? He had the ghost of Deshaun Jackson recently, right? They traded away Marquise Brown. They signed Mark Andrews to a good deal, right? Which is good, but that's it. Rashad Bateman's never on the field. Devin Duvernay, right? Your breakout candidate of the year, who actually had a pretty decent year, couldn't stay on the field and is not an alpha receiver by any stretch of the imagination. Like, I could argue that Baltimore's receiving core this year was even worse than the Chicago Bears receiving core. And the Chicago Bears receiving core is just the laughing stock of social media, right? So I'm buying him thinking that he's going to be traded in the offseason because whoever trades for him is going to invest a lot in him. They're going to know what they have in him, and they're going to build around him. And I think he's going to easily return the QB6 value.
So I offer you the 104, 24 first, and Christian Watson. Are you taking that?
I mean, it's definitely tempting, right? But if you need a quarterback, the 104 is probably not going to get you that, because in most super flex leagues, it's going to be Bijan Robinson and then Bryce Love and CJ Stroud, and either order is going to go number 2 and number 3. So
you're a couple years late on Bryce Love, buddy.
Or
Bryce Young.
Bryce Young. Sorry. I'm looking at Jordan Love over here on my other screen, so I'm mixing it up. But yeah, you're not getting a quarterback at 104. 2024 first. I mean, God only knows what that's going to be. And Christian Watson, I mean, I'm not a fan of Christian Watson in the slightest bit. So that particular deal wouldn't do it for me. It's tempting, and I think it's like mostly fair value, I guess you could say. But it really just depends on if I can project that 2024 first to be early. Ultimately, I don't think I would pull the trigger on that, just because, as we were saying, having these elite level quarterbacks are worth their weight in gold in super flex league. So I just don't think I could pull the trigger on that. But I want to move on from these quarterbacks because we actually talked about them a little bit more than I thought we would. So let's get the other icky position out of the way, right? Let's talk about tight ends really quick. And I don't necessarily know if there's a lot to talk about when it comes to tight ends, right? There's the biggest one is Kyle Pitts is still ranked the tight end one on Keep Trade Cut. Do we still agree with that? Is there any world where we're taking another tight end over Kyle Pitts, especially if we can get more value on top of it?
I mean, if I can tear down from Kyle Pitts to like, Pat Fryermuth, TJ Hawkinson, Dallas Goedert, Dalton Schultz in the first, any of those guys, I'm probably taking it. Maybe not Dallas Goedert. He's a little bit older than I realized, but I mean, as far as those other young guys go, I can definitely see a world where owners are just over it and want to get the production out of the tight end spot. I mean, with the injury, I'm not concerned as far as that injury goes. I mean, the Falcons have come out and said they're not concerned at all for 2023. They had no reason really to play him. They knew they weren't competing this year, and he's still so damn talented. It's like, who else are you more happy to have on your roster? I mean, unless you're the number one team in your league, it's going to be Travis Kelce. But other than that, I mean, who else are you happier to have on your roster than the 22-year-old who could be just an insane positional advantage? I mean, I don't have the stats in front of me, but going back, I'm pretty sure Kyle Pitts would have been a top 20 receiver as a rookie. Those stats that he put up. It might be, the numbers might be a little bit off. Don't quote me on that, but he would have been a solid starting receiver in your lineup if he played the wide receiver position. So having that kind of upside at the tight end spot, I mean, it's so hard to turn down. Am I still taking him at the spots where I would take him last year, at the, early second round, mid second round? No. But I do still think there's not all that many, like there's nobody that I'd really rather have over him in a heads up deal at this moment.
Yeah, I agree, but I kind of also disagree at the same time. In like a 1-for-1 or just a value-based deal, I still really like Kyle Pitts. I'm not gonna lie though, after what we saw out of TJ Hawkinson in Minnesota, I think that we as a collective, not just me and you, but like anyone that is involved in Dynasty football, TJ Hawkinson has thrown his hat into the ring of being the tight end one in Dynasty, because he was, outside of Travis Kelce, he was the most consistent, most biggest heavy hitter tight end. And after he got traded to Minnesota, once he kind of got the playbook down and everything, I mean, dude, he took off. He did really, really cool things in Minnesota. They're going to sign him to a long-term deal, unless I don't know if they did when they traded him. I can't for the life of me remember. But Hawkinson's going to be staying in Minnesota. Minnesota's going to have a good offense for the foreseeable future, especially with Justin Jefferson taking all of the big looks away from anyone else on the field. So honestly, I hate saying this because I traded away TJ Hawkinson right before he was traded to Minnesota, go figure. But yeah, if you could give me a deal where I'm getting TJ Hawkinson plus for Kyle Pitts, and that plus is even just somewhat decent, probably going to strongly consider it.
Yeah, I mean, TJ Hawkinson is like especially the one. I feel like Pat Fryermuth might be just a step behind him, but I mean, we all knew how good TJ Hawkinson was. I mean, he was locked in what wasn't a great offense for a long time in Detroit. Obviously they've stepped up now, but is TJ Hawkinson still like a Travis Kelce? No, not yet, at least. Can he be? Yes. But yeah, when it comes to, it's probably those two guys are the only ones that I'm like, all right, fine. Like this is a deal I'm happy with. It's kind of hard to turn this down. Because I mean, if Kyle Pitts doesn't pan out, then it's like everything you invested in him is so washed. It's like you had to buy him at such a high price for the last 2 years that it makes no sense to sell him. I don't even know.
No, you're right. It doesn't make any sense to sell him because unless you were the lucky person that drafted him, right? And if you were the person that drafted him, that's the only way that you're considering selling him right now, right? Like if you bought him at any point over the last 2 years, you sent double of what you would get in a trade for him today, right? So there's no reason to cut your losses and trade him away already. So I think Kyle Pitts, for the sake of anything, I would say maybe don't draft him at his ADP, but if your league is currently ongoing, you're not in a startup, he's just a firm hold, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have him in 2 leagues. I have him in 2 leagues, and I haven't received a single offer for him. I mean, it's not like I'm going out there and offering around and trying to sell him, but like he's a guy you would think people would say like, hey, he had a garbage season. Like, let me go see if I can try and snag this, top tier talent. But I don't know. I mean, Atlanta's such a mess, and I mean, I don't know. Drake London sucked in that offense too. Drake London wasn't startable in that offense for 90% of the games this year as well. So it's like, are they going to upgrade a quarterback or no? Yeah, and then, I mean, the market is so crazy this year that you kind of have to hold, because if anything of even remote significance happens, even if it's Derek Carr that goes over there,
I was
it's
about to say that. Yeah.
but any of the quarterbacks on the open market, if it's, I doubt Aaron Rodgers is going to Atlanta, but I mean, there's Aaron Rodgers, Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, all these guys. It's like I would be happy with any of those guys over Marcus Mariota, throwing to Drake London and Kyle Pitts. And I think that almost any quarterback move is going to be a boost in value. So it's tough to. And then also they have a top they have the sixth pick in the draft or something like that.
It's a something like that. I think it might be 7.
Yeah, it's like a top 10 pick. So I mean, they also are very viable to trade up and go get a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young. So I see no reason to sell unless it's that specific deal, like Hawkinson in the 106 or Hawkinson 105, Freiermuth in the 104. Like, all right, you've forced my hand and I have no choice. So take Kyle Pitts, and I guess I'll just be happy that I didn't crash and burn with him, but probably not going to be happy when I watch the rest of his career play out. So who knows? I'm not going to pretend to know on that one.
So before we move on to the running backs, I'm just going to get your take on this. So if you had to pick one tight end to buy low on, I'll give you a group. They're all tight ends between 11 and 17. I'm going to give you a few names specifically because they're kind of in the same age range, right? Who are you buying at their current price? You have Cole Kmet ranked at tight end 11. You got Isaiah Likely at 13, Trey McBride at 14, and Chiggy Okonkwo at 17.
I mean, I guess Trey McBride. I mean, he flashed a lot. I think it was the last game of the season, right? Put up like 20 something points. I mean, I think he's really talented, and he was a guy that a lot of people liked coming out last year. I think his name value still holds something in the tight end landscape. Probably, I think it's going to be Trey McBride. I mean, I don't want a piece of Darren Waller whatsoever. I mean, Cole Kmet, I think, is pretty fairly valued. Probably I might have him over Njoku and Dolchich, but yeah, probably Trey McBride there.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Either Trey McBride or Chiggy Okonkwo. The only reason why I would lean Okonkwo maybe a bit more is because I think you can get him for cheaper. There's not a huge value discrepancy between them on Keep Trade Cut, but most people that bought into Trey McBride, right, in their rookie drafts last year, it was probably like a late first or early second round pick. He went top 15 in a lot of leagues, where Chiggy Okonkwo was probably like a round 3 flyer for most people. So I think you can get Chiggy for a bit cheaper, but with that being said, I trust in the talent of McBride more. So I'm with you. I would choose one of those two to go after if I'm looking for, a swing at the tight end position. It wasn't just us. It was a lot of people, right, that was calling for a Cole Kmet breakout year. And we kind of saw it, right? He had less targets, but overall he had a lot of boom weeks, a lot of productive weeks. And I think 7 touchdowns compared to his 0 touchdowns last year. So if I were to bet on the next guy being Cole Kmet this upcoming year, I would honestly lean Chiggy a bit more than McBride. But the only reason why I say that is because Arizona is going through like a big turnover right now between their head coach. They're not going to have Kyler for the first half of the year. They're going to trade away DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, I'm just kind of scared of Arizona. So give me Chiggy in a struggling Tennessee offense that's badly looking for a revamp. But we'll move on to the running backs here. Running backs and receivers are always a bit more exciting to talk about. So we can kind of go tier by tier here. Let's just kind of go 5 at a time. We'll kind of keep it a little high level between each of these guys. and we'll just pick out our biggest buy low, sell high of the group. I don't necessarily know if you can find a quote unquote buy low in the top 5, and I don't know if you can find a quote unquote sell high in like, the 20 to 25 range, but we'll do our best. So in tier 1, the top 5, Breece Hall, RB1. I know you love him. Jonathan Taylor, Kenny Walker, Christian McCaffrey, and Saquon Barkley. So your biggest sell high of this group, who's that going to be?
I mean, it's kind of hard to want to, sell any of them, but in reality, running backs are always sell highs at all time. I mean, when you paid attention to the quarterback market during this season, the RB1 changed like 4 times, and now it's back to Breece Hall according to Keep Trade Cut. I think Jonathan Taylor is probably the one that I'm the most worried about. He's probably the one who showed us the least this year, aside from Breece Hall, who tore his ACL. But I mean, yeah, JT didn't have the year that we all expected him to. He wasn't a league winner, and it hurt a lot of people. I think it's scary what's going on in Indianapolis. I mean, they're another one who are prime candidates to improve at quarterback, but I mean, he is about a year out from wanting to look that from that age where you're looking to sell your running backs, 25, 26. So I think CMC is still potential for the RB1, and Saquon's also the RB1, in terms of redraft in any given situation. They can win you any week, so it's hard to want to get rid of them for any price. I'd have to say JT, I guess. I don't know. Just shoot me. I don't know, dude. They're the top 5 running backs. It's like every offseason you go through this. Like you don't know who's number 1. You barely know who's number 2. I don't know.
Yeah, if it comes down, if I had to choose one of these guys as a sell high, it's going to be a coin toss between JT and Breece Hall. And the only reason why I say Breece Hall is because I don't view him as the overall Dynasty RB1. I don't even know if I have him in my own personal top 5. He's probably RB5 or RB6 for me. The only reason why I say that is because the first half of his second year, he's going to be hobbled by his ACL injury. I know there's a lot of reports saying that he's going to be ready by training camp. No running back bounces back that quick. He's going to take at least a half a season to get up and running. Plus, they still have Michael Carter. They have Knight, right? Zonovan Knight, who went out there and he played really, really well this year. Plus, I'm pretty sure they still have James Robinson under contract for next year. And the Jets are just, what are they doing at quarterback? Is it going to be Zach Wilson? Is it going to be Mike White? Are they going to bring in a veteran? Are they going to do something? I mean, it's just weird. I don't foresee Breece Hall ever being considered the Dynasty RB1 ever again, except for this point in time, because we're only a few months from Bijan Robinson entering the league. We're only a few months away from Breece Hall, the notification popping up on your phone. Breece Hall may not be ready for training camp. Oh, there it is. His value's ticking down a little bit. So I'm calling him my sell high because I currently, if he's ranked as the Dynasty RB1, I don't think he'll ever return that value. I think he could easily be a top 5 guy once he gets healthy, but there's too many question marks with his health, too many question marks with the Jets, and there's just at least 2 or 3 better options out there right now. So I'm selling him as the RB1.
Well, I think you saying that you don't even know if he's in your top 5 dynasty RBs, like you're smoking crack. I can't agree with you on that one. I think
he didn't really. I mean, he had 2 games over 20 points, and then he got hurt. Like that's all we saw from him was 2 games, like 2 solid games.
All right, hang on. I'm gonna pull up the snap shares now because now you got me going. Yeah. So those were. Let's see. He had 4 games where he saw more than 50% of snaps. In those games, for 51% of snaps, he scored 15 points on 8 carries, by the way. He got 11 targets in that freaking game. Okay, he had 11 targets, scored 15 points. 15 points the next game was 66%, 27, 20, then scored 13 in the first quarter of that game against Denver. This guy's a stud. He's an absolute stud. We just saw Saquon Barkley come back from the same injury. I'm not worried about him. The only running back that I'm okay with like swapping him for in most cases, if I'm not getting a big piece back, is going to be Kenneth Walker. I mean, it's just the age value and the Kenny Walker's an animal. Those guys are probably my 1 and 2. And then I think by default, I mean, CMC is going to be turning 27 in a couple months. Saquon's, about to turn 26. It's tough for me to put them at that RB1 spot. I think it's Brees Hall and Kenny Walker for me.
But you know what the trend is, right? Brees Hall, he has one game with 11 targets, another game with 9. The other ones, 1, 6, 2, and 2. What happened in the 2 games where he received over 6 targets? The Jets lost. The Jets lost, and the reason and they were playing from behind. And if we think this Jets team is going to be competitive, they're not going to go give Brees Hall a workhorse load, and you cannot trust a guy that's not going to have a workhorse load to be the dynasty RB1. There's no reason for them not to keep Michael Carter in the mix. There's no reason for them not to keep Knight in the mix. Again, I think Brees Hall can produce top 5 numbers on a limited snap count, even if he's only seeing 70 to 80% of the work there. That's still pretty damn good, but he's not deserving of the dynasty RB1. I'm sorry. There's too much competition. I don't trust the Jets, whatever. You and I could go back and forth.
I just want to say one just quick stat. I vehemently disagree, but he saw at least 19 touches in the forms of targets or carries in every game after week 2. So it's like, and he scored 4 straight touchdowns. And there are 4 touchdowns straight in those 4 games, right? I mean, he's the guy who scored at like just about every single game when he was at college. He has the longest NCAA touchdown rushing record in consecutive games, however the hell you say it. He's an animal, and I stand by it. And you're gonna eat your socks just like you were about to do in weeks 4, 5, and 6 before the turf gods came and frigged things up.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't think he's going to be firmly in the RB1 overall conversation this time next year. So we'll see. We'll pick this conversation up next year. We could make an hour-long video about Brees Hall, just me and you arguing, because it's the one player, literally like the one player you and I have just completely disagreed on since he's entered the league. So that's been fun. But let's move on to this next tier of running backs. So RB 6 through 10, we got Travis Etienne, Josh Jacobs, Austin Eckler, Javonte Williams, and DeAndre Swift. There's a lot of scary names in this list, right? DeAndre Swift, no idea what's going on with him because the OC is staying, or Ben Johnson, the OC, he's staying put in Detroit. Dan Campbell staying put in Detroit. Jamal Williams, as of now, not staying put in Detroit, but he's basically already said he's fine with taking a team-friendly deal to stay in Detroit. They will re-sign him, and we will continue to have a headache with DeAndre Swift. Then you look at Javonte Williams, coming off of an ACL tear. Granted, Denver is going to get a new coach. Denver is going to completely revamp everything. And Russell Wilson's not a bad quarterback. He just looked like a bad quarterback because the coaching was just awful, like absolutely horrendous, right? Like he started to look a little bit more like Russell Wilson towards the end of the year. So Denver could be interesting, but Javonte's coming back from that injury. We've only seen him in a split backfield with Melvin Gordon to date. Like, what can we expect from him? And then Austin Eckler, he'll be 28 into next season. Josh Jacobs, phenomenal year. You and I both called that. We were screaming from the top of the heavens to be drafting him as a top 5 RB at the cost of an RB 15. So kudos to us. Shout out to that. But he's going to be a free agent, right? We don't know where he's going to end up. What's the situation he's going to find himself in? And then Travis Etienne, I mean, he's all over the place. One week he'll have 25. The next week he'll have 4 points. So dude, like what's going on in this tier? This is like one of the hardest tiers on this list for me to actually break down.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is like the definition of like the tier down tier. It's like if I can get Nick Chubb in a first for Travis Etienne, like taking that in a heartbeat. Tony Pollard in a first for Etienne, taking that in a heartbeat. For almost any of these guys, add a first to any of the running backs that are between like RB 12 and like 17, and I'm good. I'm taking that, and I'm probably walking away pretty freaking happy with it because I'm gonna get probably the same production outside of Austin Eckler and Josh Jacobs. I'm gonna get probably the same exact production out of Nick Chubb, maybe even Najee Harris. Najee Harris didn't have a terrible year. I mean, obviously wasn't what he was last year, and I think we all knew what Najee was when he came out at 24 years old. He wasn't gonna smash for 4 years, 5 years. I'm probably fine tearing down to Najee Harris in a first, honestly. I mean, I like did you mention Ramondre? I'm definitely taking Ramondre in a first over any of those guys. I don't think you're getting that deal. But yeah, I mean, give me almost any significant piece on top of any of the RB 12 to 17, and you can have almost any of them off my hands.
Yeah, I think if I have to pick one to quote unquote buy low, well, honestly, the only person you're going to be able to buy low on is either Javonte or DeAndre Swift because of the concerns around them. Like, just because Jacobs is going to be a free agent doesn't mean you're going to be able to buy him for a cheap price after the season he had. Austin Eckler, you're never going to be able to get Eckler for cheap. Travis Etienne might honestly be cheaper than Josh Jacobs and Austin Eckler. So sitting up there at the RB6 on KTC, I think there is some valuation errors within that. It says he's valued 850 points over Austin Eckler. I don't know if my league mates would agree with that, and I don't know if I do either. So if I'm picking a buy low, probably Travis Etienne just because of the intrigue there. If I'm picking a sell high, God, I guess Josh Jacobs because he's going to be a free agent. You can't even call Swift and Williams sell high because you're not going to get good value for either of them. So it's such a weird tier, dude. Can't get over it.
I gave up the 108 for Javonte, so I mean, I guess not terrible return, but
and I think that's about as far as I'd be comfortable with giving up for Javonte, right? I wouldn't give up a top 5 pick in the 2023 class, and then that was in one QB, by the way, for anyone watching. So in the 108, I mean, I think I would give up as early as the 106 for Javonte in one quarterback leagues, I think, just because I don't think you're going to get the same quality unless one of those top 5 guys falls. I really like that deal for you. I think that's a very fair, very fair exchange, I should say.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't even know if I can call Josh Jacobs a sell low because I feel like this is where he's like should be valued. You know, like this is probably where we were calling for him to be drafted. You know, last year.
Yeah. Well, exactly. You and I mean, dude, we were saying Josh Jacobs top 5, and it happened, and now he's being valued as top 7, which I think is probably about the most you could ask for, right?
Yeah, we freaking smashed that, by the way. And I was actually able to flip Josh Jacobs in one league. I flipped him for Travis Etienne in a second, and I flipped Travis Etienne for Breece Hall in a first, which turned out to be the 103. So that guy got completely robbed. I actually feel like kind of a jerk about that one. But that just shows you what you're able to do with elite running backs during the season. So, I mean, I guess I'll sell Josh Jacobs. It'll break my heart, and I'll have to get a really good deal for it. But, yeah, I think Josh Jacobs would probably be my sell.
Yeah, it's tough. I'm going to skip down the list a little bit just because I want to move into these receivers in a second. But I'm going to bring up a few names. They are valued between the RB 16 and RB 26. So we've got J.K. Dobbins, and this is going to be in order, right? J.K. Dobbins, Dameon Pierce, Rashad White, James Cook, and Cam Akers. We have those 5 guys. J.K. Dobbins being the highest one up, Cam Akers being the lowest one up. Are there anyone in that group that you think need to are just completely misvalued right now?
I think Rashad White is probably a little bit high. You know, I mean, if you sent me, yeah, I mean, Rashad White is probably a little bit high for me. Honestly, Dameon Pierce might even be a little bit high for me. I mean, you can't forget where he was drafted. You know, I would probably take Miles Sanders over just about all those guys. J.K. Dobbins, I think, might be a little bit undervalued. I think he's actually might be a buy low. I mean, it's hard to say at RB16 that he's a buy low, but I mean, I think he's under the radar for a lot of people. I think he could definitely, you know, he's coming off of one of those ACL injuries. So I think he's a guy who can definitely come back and smash next year and, you know, be in a really weird spot as a 25-year-old running back who's had one really great year. But he was the prospect he was a great prospect is what I was trying to say. But he is probably the one who I'm buying off of this list. And I don't ever see Rashad White being a lead back really, like long term for Tampa Bay or really anyone else. So he's definitely a sell for me. James Cook is more of a hold. You know, it's yet to be seen what's going to go on with that Buffalo backfield with, you know, Devin Singletary's situation and and all that going on there. But Miles Sanders, I'm definitely taking over all of them. But yeah, that's probably how I feel about him.
I would say, and it breaks my heart to say it, because I was the biggest James Cook fan this time last year. I'm gonna go with James Cook here. And he had flashes. He had a couple of really good games, but I don't know how much of the game plan he's going to be in Buffalo next season. And the only reason why I say that is because Buffalo can entice any free agent running back that's going to be out there this offseason, right? Guys like Miles Sanders, Tony Pollard, Josh Jacobs, who else is there? Even a guy like Damian Harris from the Patriots, right? Like, Buffalo is not going to hand the reins to James Cook. James Cook's role, I as badly as I would like for it to expand, it's probably going to be about what it is now at most. They're going to go out there and they're going to get a guy that's going to be a big difference maker on that offense because they're too good to have a hole in the backfield like that. So I think I would sell James Cook at RB21. And I know I didn't bring this guy up, but one of my favorite moves right now to do is to tear down from James Cook to Tyler Algier, a guy like Tyler Algier, because I think that the other party would add a decent amount to Tyler Algier if they want to get James Cook. And I mean, think about it. Algier was, I think, a 4th or a 5th round pick for the Falcons. Usually you don't want to put your eggs in that basket. He had 1,000 yards rushing this year. Cordarrelle Patterson is like basically ancient. And the Falcons have so many roster needs. They're not going to spend money in free agency on a running back. They're not going to spend prime draft capital on a running back. Maybe they spend a day 3 pick on a guy that can catch passes on 3rd downs. But Tyler Algier proved to be a very reliable running back over the last half of this season. And I think he's going to easily return that RB28 value that he currently has for the 2023 season. So I like tearing down to him.
Yeah, and everyone assumes that Atlanta is going to be drafting a running back, but that's not a guarantee. I mean, they're not necessarily in a position to go draft, the next Saquon Barkley. I mean, look what happened when the Giants drafted Saquon and they didn't have a team built around him. I mean, yeah, he was fun to watch and he was great for fantasy, but like he didn't win them any freaking Super Bowls yet. So, or any playoff games even for that matter. So, I mean, that's not really the recipe for NFL GM success. So I don't really know why Atlanta would go that route when it seems like they're adding, receiver. They added Kyle Pitts early. They added Drake London early. They're adding these skill guys. I think the running back is usually the last piece to add when you do get your rookie quarterback. So if they do draft a quarterback, it wouldn't surprise me if they also tagged along in the 3rd round, 2nd, 3rd round and picked up one of these guys that we actually like in the back end of the rookie draft, the 1st round of the rookie draft this year. But I mean, Tyler Algier has just as good of a chance of having a job next year as, Brian Robinson, Cam Akers, any of the guys above him, Miles Sanders, James Cook, all of these guys. He has just as good a chance to have a lead role as any of them. So I'm definitely taking, James Cook in a second, or Tyler Algier in a second for James Cook and AJ Dillon, Aaron Jones, Alvin Kamara, Cam Akers, Brian Robinson, all those guys for sure.
Yeah, so definitely an interesting one to track. I mean, think about it. The difference, Tyler Algier is RB28 in KTC. Dameon Pierce is RB17. They arguably did the same thing their rookie seasons, right? Like Dameon Pierce did it earlier and did have a couple of bigger games than Tyler Algier did. Algier didn't really get to break out until the second half of the season, but the overall numbers pretty damn similar, right? Only difference is that there's more turnover going on in Houston right now. They're going to bring in their own guys. We saw that when new coaching staff comes in, running backs aren't safe. James Robinson, right? There was no reason for the Jaguars to draft Travis Etienne in the 1st round, but they did. And James Robinson was an undrafted. He was either a 7th round or undrafted free agent. Either way, but those day 3 guys typically aren't safe when there's a lot of turnover in the building, and the Falcons don't have the same turnover that Houston does. And Houston is getting their quarterback guaranteed in this draft, right, with pick number 2. So food for thought, right? What's the difference between Dameon Pierce and Tyler Algier? About 12 spots on KTC. So let's move into the wide receivers here for a little bit. I'm going to skip over this first tier. You're not getting Justin Jefferson from anyone. You're not getting Jamar Chase from anyone. Even CeeDee Lamb and AJ Brown, probably moot points. I have A.J. Brown. Tyler's been trying to get him from me. He has offered me the world and a half. And I've been stupid to say no to some of the deals that he's offered me. I just can't get rid of A.J. Brown when I'm contending. And I don't think anyone in their right mind would currently get rid of A.J. Brown unless it's just like an absolute deal that you can't say no to. So we're going to skip those 4 because they are elites. But we can look at this next tier. So let's look at wide receiver 5 through wide receiver 10. We got Jalen Waddle, Garrett Wilson, your boy Amon Ra, my boy T. Higgins, Chris Olave, and Tyreek Hill. In this group, I think one of these things is not like the other, personally. But who is your biggest sell high in this group? Because you can get quite a lot for any of these guys right now.
Sell high. I don't want to get any of these guys off my roster, really. But I guess T. Higgins, maybe. He's the one who's got the most competition in front of him. He's the only one who's not the number 1 receiver in his offense, in his own offense. So T. Higgins would probably have to be the one for me, just based off of logic for that reason. And also I think Garrett Wilson and I think Garrett Wilson is still improving. I think Amon-Ra is still improving. Olave is still improving, and they're going to continue to get better. T. Higgins, I think, is on his way to, the peak. I don't know how much better we're going to see T. Higgins get. He's had those injury concerns, and it's kind of a frustrating year to own him in a lot of spots. So T. Higgins is probably going to be my sell out of the group.
See, I'll disagree with T. Higgins. The only reason why is because, like you said, I think the injuries played a really big part. The thing with T. Higgins is I don't want to say he's boom or bust because most weeks he's going to get you at least 14 points, but he does have, off the top of my head, as someone who has a lot of T. Higgins, there was definitely at least, 2 to 4 weeks where he potentially lost me my week because he just went out there and completely dudded out. And I mean, I guess you can kind of expect that when you're sharing the field with Jamar Chase, when Hayden Hurst is breaking out, when they're getting Tyler Boyd more involved, right? So T. Higgins is definitely a risky asset. I like where he's valued at wide receiver 8. I think maybe it's a little high, and that's speaking as someone who really favors T. Higgins. So I can see the argument to sell him. My biggest sell in this list is actually Chris Olave, believe it or not. And I don't think that's a very popular take with a lot of people. I'm not nearly as high on Chris Olave as a lot of people are. I think calling him wide receiver 9 in Dynasty already is just kind of wild. I mean, he had a big year, right? Over 1,000 yards as a rookie, only 4 touchdowns. We knew his touchdown upside was going to be limited. His ceiling is and always was going to be a guy like DJ Moore. And DJ Moore has been awesome. DJ Moore has done in the league, except for this year because the quarterback carousel. Every year prior to this year, DJ Moore always gets 1,100 yards and 4 or 5 touchdowns, even as a rookie. That's what he had. Chris Olave, 1,042 yards and 4 touchdowns. And it's just uncanny how similar it is in their first year. But the difference here is that Chris Olave is valued wide receiver 9. DJ Moore is not even on my screen right now, and I have the top 22 guys up. That kind of concerns me. Plus, what's going on with the Saints? They're sticking with their coach. We don't know who their quarterback's going to be. Michael Thomas is leaving. Jarvis Landry's a free agent. Rashid Shaheed is their wide receiver 2 right now, and he has everyone fooled, thinking that he's this like big extravagant dynasty buy low. Chris Olave is not going to be the alpha here, right? He's not an alpha receiver. He's a supporting receiver, which is fine. There's room for that. I'm not buying that as a top 10 dynasty receiver, though.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Olave is one who we kind of mentioned before the season started. Like, if you're one who's at the 106, 107, like in the 2022 draft, there's almost no need to trade up because you're going to be able to trade Olave for whichever receiver you wanted, probably plus a piece. And that's kind of how it turned out. I mean, we look at, Amo, Treylon Burks, and Drake London, they're all ranked below Chris Olave right now. So you're probably going to have to add on a piece from those other receivers to get to Chris Olave. So that plan kind of panned out. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. He was a supporting receiver in college. I mean, that's his role in the NFL as well. But I mean, when you have the security of a wide receiver too for the next 8 years. I mean, that's a real good weapon to have in dynasty fantasy football. Am I buying my wide receiver 9? No, probably not. But I'm also probably not buying T Higgins at wide receiver 8. So I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I think I was more disappointed by T Higgins this year than I was Chris Olave. I think I was probably Chris Olave beat expectations. T Higgins didn't for me, so maybe that's why that he was the name that jumped out in my head. But yeah, that's how I feel about it.
No, and that's fair to say, right? I'm not going to hold the quote unquote down year against T Higgins. I mean, T Higgins was still top 15, top 20 wide receiver. He was still going out there and being a very consistent wide receiver 2 for you in like 90% of his weeks. So I'm trying not to hold it too much against him. Plus, I believe he's going to be a free agent after this upcoming year with no option because he was, I think, the first pick of the second round. So no 5th round option or a 5th year option there for him. But we'll see what happens.
Let me ask you really quick before we move on to the next tier. For you, so it's for everyone pretty much. Justin Jefferson is the tier 1. Jamar Chase he's barely
tier 1.5.
Yeah, right. And then it's CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown. Are you putting Amon-Ra St. Brown in that tier with them? Because I think I am, and I think it's hard to argue against it.
Nope. I'm not putting Amon-Ra in that tier 2. I just can't do it. And the reason why is because Jameson Williams is going to be heavily involved next year. Heavily involved. They traded up for him on purpose. We knew that if he wasn't even supposed to play at all his rookie year, right? And then as we got closer to the season, we realized, okay, maybe he would. His snap count wasn't really there. He had a touchdown on a broken play, but that was really all he did over the 5 or 6 games that he played. He's going to be big time in their plans next year, especially with the same offensive coordinator sticking around. That's going to take away from Amon-Ra. I think Amon-Ra is still going to be very solid, and I think valuing him around the wide receiver 7, I would say, yeah, that's probably fair. I'd probably put him somewhere in my 7 to 10 range as well because he's just so damn consistent. But I don't think that the ceiling is quite there moving forward to put him in the same tier as AJ Brown and CeeDee Lamb. If you're going to say he deserves to be in that tier 3, that I can see the argument for, but I cannot put him in the same conversation as AJ Brown or CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, it's like, I don't know. I definitely, I would not trade Amon-Ra straight up for Jalen Waddle, Garrett Wilson, T Higgins, or Chris Olave. It would never happen. Would I maybe add like a third onto him to get, CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown? Probably, but I mean, I think Amon-Ra has done more in his first 2 leagues in the year his first 2 leagues in the year. Holy goodness. His first 2 years in the league than CeeDee Lamb did in his first 2 years in the league. It was just CeeDee Lamb's name value. And CeeDee Lamb has finally proven to us this year that he is a fantasy wide receiver 1. Amon-Ra St. Brown has done it since he got the opportunity his rookie year. I don't see him and Jameson Williams cutting into each other's target shares really, or snap shares. I think they do completely different jobs. So I don't necessarily see that being an issue. But yeah, I think for me, he's right there neck and neck with CD and AJ Brown. I don't want to add too much onto him to go get one of those guys.
Well, that's the thing though with Amon-Ra. You're not drafting him because he scores a lot of touchdowns, right? You're drafting him because he catches a lot of balls, gets a lot of yards. 106 receptions for 1,161 yards, pretty damn good. But the fact of the matter is when you add Jameson Williams on a full snap count and he's going out there, they are going to take more deep shots. Now, granted, I will say this. Them getting rid of TJ Hawkinson was about the best thing that could have happened to Amon-Ra, right? Because those kind of looks, that's what you want for Amon-Ra, and he's going to absorb TJ Hawkinson's share. That's what he did. That's what he's going to continue to do. So I can see that argument as well. I can see why you would say Jameson's really not going to affect it too much. I'm a big believer in having a solid wide receiver 1 supports a wide receiver 2. That's why I like T. Higgins. So, I don't disagree at all. I just want to pump the brakes because like you brought up CeeDee Lamb. The difference is CeeDee Lamb was drafted to be the guy in Dallas, right? Where Amon-Ra was drafted to be, maybe the wide receiver 2 or a supporting guy, later round flyer for Detroit. And then they purposely traded up in the first round when they realized Jameson Williams was still there. That's the only thing that really tricks me out here, is that they purposely went after Jameson Williams. So I really feel like they're going to turn him into, I don't want to say the focal point, because Amon-Ra's not going anywhere, but I just think there's going to be less of a spotlight on Amon-Ra as Jameson Williams breaks out next year.
Yeah, and I'm a JMO guy myself. I mean, he definitely flashed in those couple games and just those little snaps that he had. I mean, it's going to be a show to see when he gets a full snap count. I mean, it doesn't show up on the stat sheets and on your fantasy apps, but I mean, there were 2 balls that Jared Goff probably overthrew him on by 4 or 5 yards that would have been 60+ yard touchdowns, and there was one that was called back for a penalty, and just a 20% snap share. I mean, the guys, and he's commanding targets when he is on the field as well. So they are designing plays for him, and they're scheming to get him the ball when he's on the field. So yeah, I mean, we'll see how it pans out, but I'm definitely not shying away from Amon-Ra right now.
So we talked about Jameson Williams. I'm going to skip around to this tier. I only want to go into one more tier and then highlight one more thing before we sign out here. But I want to talk about our 2022 rookies and their different valuations right now. So Jameson Williams is, we're throwing out Drake London, Garrett Wilson, and Chris Olave right now because they're all ranked in the top 15 wide receivers on KTC. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that, right? Even Chris Olave, I said I'm not buying him as wide receiver 9. I'm still smart enough to keep him in my top 15, right? So Jameson Williams is at 16. Christian Watson's at 19. Pickens 21, Treylon Burks 22, and then Jahan Dotson is all the way down at wide receiver 29. I don't know why Jahan Dotson is significantly lower than those other guys. 2 guys that stick out of this group that I think clearly need to be wide receiver 4 and wide receiver 5 of these 5 guys is George Pickens and Christian Watson. I think that it blows my mind that people are rating Christian Watson or George Pickens over Treylon Burks. Burks can definitely be a stud in this league, right? Like, yeah, we didn't get the rookie year that we wanted to out of him, but Tennessee was an absolute dumpster fire. He fought injury, really didn't have a whole hell of a lot on the field outside of Derrick Henry, right? So I'm not going to hold that against him. His year 1 trajectory was actually very similar to A.J. Brown's production, at least over their first 5 or 6 games, right? So take that with a grain of salt for what you will. I think saying that Burks is around the wide receiver 22, I think that's fair to say. I just think it's unfair to have Pickens and Christian Watson above him.
Yeah, I mean, and when you go back to when you just compared Treylon Burks to A.J. Brown, I mean, like if you subtract the injury, like who's to say that Treylon Burks doesn't roll those, 17, 18-point games into some 23, 24-point games. He never really got the chance to get rolling. It was an ugly year for Tennessee. I kind of forgot the question you just asked me because I was so focused on Treylon Burks. I think he's such a good football player, and I think watching him play football this year tells you a lot more than looking at the stats. I mean, I think he flashed enough to the point where I definitely want him on my teams. George Pickens is for sure a guy that I'm selling high on. I think he is one who is really fun to watch, but I don't want him on any of my fantasy teams. I heard someone say, I don't remember who, I don't know, it was a couple days ago, if all you're making is highlight reel catches that you're jumping over people, it's because you're not getting separation. Like if you're having to work that hard for your catches, and that's what George Pickens is he's a jump ball receiver and a big play guy. And I mean, I don't need the volatility in my life. I have enough of that. So George Pickens is going to be definitely a sell high for me. And Christian Watson, I'm just not convinced. I mean, he was one who went to the best landing spot pre-draft, and he definitely has benefited from it. But yeah, there's no way you're going to tell me that he's a better football player than Treylon Burks. Christian Watson is a physical freak. There's no denying that. But not knowing Aaron Rodgers' future, and it's just I feel like it's entirely situationally based. And I would much rather sell him because I know I can use him to tier up to a Drake London, and it's not going to cost me much. I can tier up to Jameson Williams. It's not going to cost me probably almost anything really. I could probably trade Christian Watson straight up for Jameson Williams in a lot of spots. I would use him to go up to any of those guys. The Devonta Smith, especially, if it's in that price range. Yeah, I'm out on both Watson and Pickens. I could be totally wrong. I could be an idiot. And
well, that's the thing, right, with Christian Watson. And I don't know if you're watching. If you're watching, hey, I'm talking about you. In the last video we posted, I don't know if you were looking at the comments, but some guy was super bent out of shape that we were saying Burke should be going over Watson, right? He was super bent out of shape about it. Wrote me a book. I wrote him a book. He wrote me a novel. I haven't responded to it. I'm sorry. I'm not going to lie. I didn't read the whole thing. It is what it is. We're answering your questions here. The thing with Christian Watson is you're right. He was an opportunity receiver. Going to Green Bay when they had no legitimate receivers, you can't call Allen Lazard a legitimate receiver. If that's your argument, you're fucking wrong. They have no legitimate receivers, and they had Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers needed someone to lean on. He chose Christian Watson. Before Christian Watson came back from his injuries, guess who it was? It was Romeo Doubs. Romeo Doubs had all of us thinking that he was this big diamond in the rough. Then he gets hurt. Christian Watson comes in. Christian Watson, oh, he's the guy. He's the guy. December 19th, Romeo Doubs comes back, right? In the 4 games that they played together, Christian Watson, 4 catches for 46 yards, 6 catches for 49 yards, 1 catch for 11 yards. And then against Detroit at the end of the season, he did have 5 catches for 104 yards, which I'll give him that one. But fact of the matter is, he was his breakout happened as a result of opportunity. Like you said, he's a physical freak, and I don't doubt that he's a half-decent football player, but that's all he is. He's a half-decent football player, does not deserve to be in the top 20 wide receiver discussion at all, because when they downgrade to Jordan Love or to whoever, he's going to take a hit. When Romeo Doubs is on the field with him, when Allen Lazard is on the field with him, when both of those guys are on the field with him, I don't think he played in a full game with both of those guys until the tail end of the season. He's going to take a hit, right? So it's just, it was all opportunity rookie year. He's my biggest sell high out of any rookie from any position in the 2022 class. Christian Watson's my biggest sell high.
Yeah, man. And I'm looking at wide receivers 23 to like 30, 31. You know, I'm looking at Brandon Ayuk, Michael Pittman, DJ Moore, Jerry Jeudy. Those guys, especially, if I could tear down from Christian Watson to those guys, I'm definitely taking that all day. Marquise Brown, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Christian Kirk, Deontay Johnson. I mean, there are so many names underneath Christian Watson that I would feel so much more comfortable with having them on my roster. I think they're easier to move around because the Dynasty community knows what they are. And buying Christian Kirk is kind of like buying Pandora's box. You have no idea what you're going to get. But I mean, there's so many more talented receivers underneath him. Like, you can't tell me Christian Watson. I don't believe he's a better receiver than Jerry Jeudy, DJ Moore, Michael Pittman, Brandon. I don't believe that for a half of a second. So I'm definitely happy tearing down to those guys or tearing up to literally anybody else.
And before we wrap this up, there's one more thing I want to bring up, because I just need your thoughts on this, because I don't know anyone. Well, there's a lot of people, but you arguably are the biggest person that hates aging assets in Dynasty, right? You and I go back and forth on this all the time. I don't mind them. You try to stay away from them, whatever. Make this make sense for me, though. So Cooper Kupp, he is currently wide receiver 15. He is 29.6 years old. Devontae Adams, wide receiver 16. He is 30.1 years old. DeAndre Hopkins, 30.6, almost exactly 1 year older than Cooper Kupp, only 6 months older than Devontae Adams. And all 3 of those guys have an incredibly similar points per game showing in the 2022 fantasy season. DeAndre Hopkins is 22 spots below them at wide receiver 37. I'm not going to say sell Cooper Kupp and Devontae Adams high, but I'm 100% saying at wide receiver 37, if you're even sniffing contention, I don't see any reason to not acquire DeAndre Hopkins this offseason.
Yeah, that's whack as frick. We all saw. I mean, D-Hop was a supreme value last year in drafts, and you definitely benefited from having him on your roster and buying him that low last year. Same spot this year. I mean, as I'm looking up, one there's one receiver up until the wide receiver 30 that I would rather have than DeAndre Hopkins, and that's probably Calvin Ridley, just because I'm a Calvin Ridley fanboy. But yeah, Diop again, supreme value. I don't see any similarities between him and the 5 wide receivers surrounding him, really.
Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, people, if he was definitely staying in Arizona, I can see why he would be faded that much, because Kyler Murray's not going to be there. But also, the Raiders currently do not have a quarterback. Cooper Kupp is coming off of a big injury, and so is Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford might retire, right? He might not have a quarterback either. So it's like, what is the big difference between these scenarios? The only big difference is that a team is going to acquire Hopkins on purpose this offseason, which means that at the very least, he's going to go be, I think he's going to go be a team's luxury wide receiver too, right? He'll be able to have a say in where he gets traded to if Arizona has any form of decency whatsoever. But yeah, Hopkins is going to go somewhere, smash that wide receiver 37, and there's no reason why he should be 20 spots below Cooper Kupp and Devontae Adams. That's just really, really stupid. But anyway, that's going to do.
Sorry, no, shut up. I want to make a good point. So as we look at the top 12 receivers on a list, I think that, I mean, there's only two receivers really that don't have a legitimate wide receiver behind them. 3, I guess. Chris Olave, Stephon Diggs, Chris Olave, and Justin Jefferson. I mean, you could say Adam Thielen's a legit receiver. I don't think he doesn't compete with targets.
But yeah.
But I mean, you look at almost every other guy on this list. I mean, Jamar Chase has T. Higgins. AJ Brown has Devonta Smith. Jalen Waddle has Tyreek Hill. Amon-Ra is about to have Jameson Williams. All of these guys have really strong supporting casts. So when you look at buying receivers, I think that looking at guys that are ahead of them is not necessarily the way to go. I think that's not something that hurts receivers as much as we might have previously thought. But that's just something I was looking at earlier.
No, I think that's a really good point. Every move you make is not going to be for the guy that's going to turn into Justin Jefferson, right? Like, it's all about roster construction. It's all about having the depth. It's all about understanding what you need out of your wide receiver 2. What do you need out of your wide receiver 3? And I think that's a really, really good point to make. The NFL is turning into, I bring it up all the time. They're phasing out the workhorse role for running backs, and they're just sharing the load right in the backfield, but also on the rest of the field as well. NFL teams are realizing that it's incredibly beneficial to, you can take 2 really good receivers and get the same, if not better results than if you just have one really elite guy. So I really like that you brought that up, because I don't think we can really use that in an argument against receivers anymore, right? Like, if you want to say, oh, it caps their ceiling, okay, that's fine. But what about their floor? Their floor is just as safe as ever, if not even more safe, because they're going to have plenty of looks where they're wide open because the other guy is covered, right? So I like that you bring that up.
And sorry, one more question for you. Where are you putting Devonta Smith? Do you think he's fairly valued there, or do you think he might belong with slightly, I'm splitting hairs here maybe, but do you think he might belong with the Chris Olave, T. Higgins or in that mix?
It's tough, man. I can't buy Chris Olave at wide receiver 9. I don't think I can buy Devonta Smith at wide receiver 13. Granted, I mean, he's had a really good year, but Philly has just had a lot of things go right for them. I don't think they're slowing down anytime soon. I think Jalen Hurts is legit. AJ Brown's legit. Devonta Smith is legit. Dallas Goedert's legit. Like, they're coaching legit. I think they're just going to be really, really good, really, really solid. But if I'm swinging, right, I'm not taking Devonta Smith over Drake London like KTC would suggest. I think that there's a lot more upside with Drake London. But the reason why anyone has Drake London, it wasn't a safe pick. That was always your swing for the fence pick with Drake London, right? And that's what I would prefer to have in that scenario. Same thing. I was really big on Jameson Williams this time last year. I'm probably still taking him over Devontae Smith, who's a couple spots below. Depending on my situation, maybe I'll trade away Cooper Kupp or Devontae Adams to get a Devontae Smith. I would be fine with exploring. I think I would trade away Deebo Samuel for him too. Chris Godwin's kind of shaky. So I don't think I would have Devontae Smith as high as the wide receiver 13, but I don't think I would put him much lower. I think it's kind of a fair valuation.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just wanted to see how you felt about that, because he was one who definitely rose up a lot in the KTC rankings over the second half of the season. And I mean, I know we brought this up during our mock draft, but I mean, yeah, the guy saw 8+ targets in like 13 or 14 games this year. So yeah, he's one that I think can definitely be a contributor, long term. But
yeah,
that was fun.
Yeah, no, I like doing that. I actually have a ton of fun doing that one. And I haven't sat here and looked at the values in KTC in so long. And every time I look at them, I just think, man, we're a bunch of fucking idiots that we let this happen. Like some of these rankings, man, just absolutely asinine. But you know what? It's a collective agreement from everyone that plays Dynasty football. So I try not to argue with it too much, but there's some things that are just so outlandish on here, but it is what it is. KTC, we love you. Thanks for existing because you help us put out content. But that's going to do it for us here on That Dynasty Show. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you stuck with us this entire time. I know it was definitely a long one here for you guys here today, but we have a ton of fun doing these videos, and we hope you have a ton of fun listening to them. If you have any suggestions for us or anything that you want us to go over, any questions for us, if you want to, as long as you do it respectfully, right? If you do it in the comments and say, dude, you're wrong, you suck, that's fine. Cool. Do it. I'm all for it. Just don't send me novels because I'm not going to read them. But for myself, for Tyler, and for That Dynasty Show, we will see you next time.